The morning sun peeked through the city buildings, casting long shadows on the busy streets. Michael, a dad in his early 30s, gripped the steering wheel of his worn sedan. The rideshare app glowed on his phone, a steady stream of pings that meant another fare, another dollar for his family. He drove past gleaming skyscrapers and bustling coffee shops, a familiar route he traveled countless times a day. Each ride, each quick conversation helped pay for rent, groceries, and the new shoes his daughter needed for school. Sometimes, as he waited for a light to change, Michael's mind would drift. He'd remember the rush of adrenaline, the quick thinking, and the satisfaction of helping someone in need. Years ago, he was an EMT, a first responder, a hero in his own right. He'd learned so much, seen so much, and truly felt like he was making a difference. Life, as it often does, had taken a different turn, leading him to this driver's seat. Yet the old skills, the quick mind for emergencies, still lay just beneath the surface, a part of him that never truly went away. He'd often glance at the old, faded EMT sticker on his back bumper, a silent reminder of a past life, a different Michael. The rideshare app buzzed, pulling Michael from his thoughts of old EMT days. A new ride. The pickup spot was a fancy hotel downtown, the kind of place he usually only drove past. He pulled up to the curb, and a young woman, dressed in a sharp business suit, stepped out. She looked to be about his age, maybe a little younger, with bright, confident eyes and a sleek, expensive handbag. Her hair was pulled back perfectly, and she carried herself with an air of importance. She slid into the back seat without a glance, already holding her phone to her ear. "Yes, Mark, the quarterly reports are solid," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We're looking at a 15% increase in market share by Q3 if we push this new initiative." Michael caught her eye in the rearview mirror for a moment, and she gave a small, quick nod, still deep in her call. She kept talking about big numbers, mergers, and deadlines, words that sounded like they belonged to a very different world than his. He listened as she discussed millions of dollars and important decisions, a world of power and wealth. Her words filled the car, making his own quiet life feel even smaller. He just focused on the road, taking her to her next important meeting. Sarah finally ended her phone call, letting out a small sigh. The sudden quiet in the car felt loud after her booming voice. Michael glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was looking out the window, but then her eyes caught on something. "Oh," she said, a small, almost dismissive sound. Michael saw her gaze land on the faded EMT sticker on his bumper, visible through the rear window. She turned to him, a hint of a smirk playing on her lips. "EMT?" she asked, her tone not friendly, but rather like she was stating a fact she found amusing. "So, you used to be a paramedic, and now you're a rideshare driver." She paused, letting the question hang in the air. Seems like a bit of a waste, doesn't it? All that training, all that potential just to drive people around. Michael felt a familiar sting. It wasn't the first time someone had said something like that, but coming from Sarah, with her expensive suit and big business talk, it hit a little harder. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. He wanted to explain, to tell her about his daughter, about how life changes, but he just nodded slightly. "Things happen," he mumbled, his voice quiet. A small wave of sadness washed over him. He knew he was doing good for his family, but her words made him feel small, like he hadn't quite measured up to the person he used to be or the person he could have been. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with her unspoken judgment and his quiet hurt. The awkward silence stretched, making the car feel small and tight. Michael focused on the road, trying to shake off Sarah's words. He was approaching a busy intersection, the traffic moving steadily. Just as the light turned green and he started to press the gas, a loud, terrible screech filled the air. It was the sound of metal twisting and tires fighting the pavement. Michael's head snapped up. To his left, a car had run a red light, smashing right into the side of another vehicle. The impact was sickeningly loud, like a giant metal monster roaring in pain. Both cars spun wildly, one crashing into a lamppost, the other skidding to a stop in the middle of the intersection. Dust and bits of metal flew into the air. Sarah gasped sharply from the back seat, her earlier confident air completely gone, replaced by shock. Michael's heart hammered in his chest, not with fear, but with a different kind of urgency. He could see smoke rising from one of the crashed cars. More importantly, he could see a person slumped over the steering wheel of the car that hit the lamppost. The person wasn't moving. They looked badly hurt, their head tilted at an unnatural angle, and a dark stain was already spreading on their shirt. A crowd of people started to gather, some pointing, some looking scared, but no one seemed to know what to do. Michael knew exactly what he had to do. The sight of the injured person snapped Michael out of his daze. The world seemed to slow down, then speed up all at once. His heart still thumped hard, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was the old, familiar beat of urgency, the kind that used to kick in the moment an emergency call came over his radio. Without a second thought, Michael put his car in park, yanked on the emergency brake, and threw open his door. "Stay here. Call 911, he yelled back to Sarah, who was still frozen in the back seat, her eyes wide with fear. He didn't wait for her reply. His EMT training, buried under years of driving and daily worries, suddenly roared to life. Every lesson, every practice drill, every moment spent learning how to act in a crisis flooded his mind. He wasn't just a rideshare driver anymore. He was a first responder. He ran towards the car that had hit the lamppost, his eyes quickly scanning for dangers like leaking gas or unstable parts. People were shouting, pointing, but Michael barely heard them. His focus was entirely on the slumped figure. As he got closer, he could see the severe damage to the car and the injured person more clearly. He didn't hesitate. He rushed to the driver's side, ready to do what he knew best: save a life. Sarah, still shaking, fumbled for her phone, her fingers clumsy as she tried to dial 911. Her eyes, however, were fixed on Michael. She watched him move with a speed and purpose she hadn't seen before. The man she had just dismissed as wasting his potential was now a blur of calm, focused action. He wasn't hesitant or scared. He was brave. She saw him carefully open the damaged car door, leaning in to talk to the injured driver. He moved with a practiced ease, checking for breathing, looking for bleeding. His hands, which had just been gripping his steering wheel, were now gentle yet firm, checking the injured person's neck and wrists. He called out instructions to a bystander, asking for something to help stop the blood. His voice was steady, full of authority, cutting through the general panic of the crowd. Sarah watched as he took off his own shirt, tearing it into strips to make a makeshift bandage. He worked quickly, his brow furrowed in concentration. The smoke from the engine, the shouts from the crowd, the sirens growing louder in the distance. None of it seemed to break his focus. He was completely absorbed in helping, using his smarts and training to do something truly important. Sarah saw a hero, not a rideshare driver, and a strange feeling started to bloom in her chest, a mix of awe and a deep, surprising shame for her earlier words. Michael leaned into the damaged car, his eyes quickly scanning the injured driver. "Can you hear me?" he asked gently, checking for a response. The driver groaned, a faint sound, but a good one. He saw a deep cut on the driver's arm, bleeding heavily. Time was precious. He quickly pressed the torn strips of his shirt onto the wound, applying firm, even pressure. "Hold this here," he instructed the driver, his voice calm and steady. He then checked for other injuries, his hands moving with practiced care. He made sure the driver's head and neck were stable, telling them not to move. He kept talking to the driver, asking simple questions to keep them awake and aware. "What's your name? Can you tell me what happened?" he asked, while also checking their pulse and breathing. He knew his job now was to keep the person safe and calm, to make sure their injuries didn't get worse until the ambulance arrived. The wail of sirens grew louder, closer. Michael could hear them now, cutting through the city noise. He maintained the pressure on the arm wound, his focus unbroken. He was doing exactly what he had been trained to do, what he used to do every day. He wasn't thinking about Sarah's words, or his past, or his rideshare job. He was just Michael, the EMT, keeping a stranger alive. He could almost feel the familiar presence of his old crew around him, guiding his actions. Every second felt important, and he was ready for whatever came next. The ambulance pulled up with a screech of tires, and two paramedics jumped out, their faces serious. Michael quickly explained what he had done, pointing out the injuries and giving them an update on the driver's condition. The lead paramedic, a woman with kind but tired eyes, nodded as Michael spoke. She quickly took over, her team bringing out their own medical tools and equipment. As they worked, one of the paramedics looked at Michael. "Good job, sir," he said, his voice sincere. "Your quick thinking really made a difference. You kept them stable." Michael felt a warmth spread through him. It was a simple thank you, but it meant a lot. It was the kind of thanks he used to get regularly, a small reward for a big effort. The paramedics carefully moved the injured driver onto a stretcher, securing them gently. They loaded the stretcher into the ambulance, and within minutes, the sirens wailed again as they sped off towards the hospital. The intersection, which had been a scene of chaos, slowly began to clear. Police officers were directing traffic, and the crumpled cars were being readied for tow trucks. Michael stood for a moment, watching the ambulance disappear down the street, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. The urgent energy that had filled him slowly faded, leaving him a little tired but very, very glad. He had helped. He had truly helped. After the ambulance left and the immediate danger passed, Michael slowly walked back to his car. He felt a bit shaky, the adrenaline finally leaving his body. His shirt was gone, used for a bandage, and he was left in just his undershirt, a little dirty from the dust and effort. He opened the driver's door and slid back into his seat. Sarah was still in the back, but she wasn't looking at her phone anymore. She wasn't even looking out the window. Her eyes were fixed on Michael, and the way she looked at him was completely different. The sharp, dismissive look was gone, replaced by something soft and wide with surprise. There was respect there, too, shining clearly in her gaze. She saw him, truly saw him, for the first time. He started the engine, the familiar rumble a small comfort after the chaos. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Her mouth was slightly open, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The fancy businesswoman who had judged him just minutes ago was now just a quiet woman, stunned by what she had witnessed. The earlier sadness Michael had felt from her words was now a distant memory, replaced by a quiet strength. He knew what he was capable of, and now it seemed she did too. Michael put the car in a drive, pulling slowly away from the accident scene. The police were still directing traffic, but the immediate crisis was over. The silence in the car was different now. It wasn't awkward or heavy, it was thoughtful. Then Sarah spoke, her voice soft and shaky, a stark contrast to her earlier confident tone. "Michael," she began, her voice catching a little. I am so sorry." She paused, taking a deep breath. "What I said earlier about you wasting your potential. It was awful, and I was completely wrong." She looked down for a moment, then met his eyes in the rearview mirror, her own filled with true regret. "You are incredible. What you just did. You saved that person's life." A small, genuine smile touched Michael's lips. He didn't say anything, just listened. He could feel the sincerity in her words. "You're a hero, Michael," she continued, her voice stronger now, full of admiration. "A real hero. I had no right to judge you. I don't know anything about your life, and I was so rude." She sounded truly sorry, and Michael could see a blush creeping up her neck. Her apology felt important, like a weight lifting from the car. It made the pride he felt for his actions even stronger. Michael felt a quiet warmth spread through him as Sarah finished her apology. It wasn't just the satisfaction of knowing he had helped someone in a bad accident. It was more than that. He felt a deep sense of pride. It was the kind of pride that made his chest feel lighter, his head a little higher. He was proud of the quick choices he'd made, of remembering all his old training, and of acting without fear. But a big part of that pride came from Sarah's words, and from the new look in her eyes. He had been hurt by her comments earlier, those careless words about him wasting his potential. Now, she had seen him in a different light. She had seen him as the quick-thinking, brave person he was, not just a rideshare driver. He hadn't needed to explain himself or defend his choices. His actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. He smiled softly, a genuine, easy smile. It was good to know he could still be that person, the one who stepped up when others froze. And it felt even better to know that someone who had dismissed him so easily now understood. He wasn't just driving a car. He was living a life, a full life, where his skills and heart still mattered. He had shown her, and in doing so, he had reminded himself. Michael drove on, the traffic slowly returning to normal, though the memory of the accident hung in the air. He was still smiling a little, thinking about Sarah's apology and the look in her eyes. It was a good feeling. Then, he heard her voice again, softer this time, almost shy. "Michael," she asked. He looked at her in the rearview mirror. She was holding her phone, but not to her ear. She looked a little nervous, a tiny blush on her cheeks. Would you mind giving me your number?" Michael was surprised. "My number?" he asked, a small frown of confusion on his face. He thought she might be asking for a receipt or something for her company. She shook her head quickly. "No, not for a ride," she said, a small, embarrassed laugh escaping her lips. "I mean, if you're comfortable. I'd like to talk to you again. Maybe grab a coffee sometime. When you're not busy saving lives, of course." She gave a small, hopeful smile. Michael's smile widened. It wasn't just pride he felt now. It was a pleasant surprise. He had expected to drop her off and never see her again, a fleeting passenger in his rideshare life. But this was different. This was a real connection, a chance to be seen as more than just a driver. He quickly pulled over to the side of the road, found a pen, and wrote his number on a small piece of paper from his glove compartment. He handed it back to her, his eyes twinkling. "I like that, Sarah," he said, his voice warm. "I'd like that a lot." After dropping Sarah off at her destination, a fancy office building, Michael finally headed home. The city hummed around him, but in his car, a quiet calm had settled. He didn't have another ride lined up for a while, giving him time to think. He still felt a little tired from the rush of the accident, but a deeper feeling, a solid sense of happiness, filled him. He thought about the injured driver, hoping they would be okay. He thought about the paramedics' thanks, and most of all, he thought about Sarah. Her change from being so judgmental to calling him a hero and then asking for his number was a lot to take in. It felt good to be seen, truly seen, for the person he was, not just for the job he did. As he pulled into his driveway, the sun beginning to set, Michael knew one thing for sure. His potential wasn't wasted. It was alive and well, used every single day. Whether it was driving to earn money for his family or stepping up to help a stranger in need, he was always doing his best. He was a dad, a former EMT, a rideshare driver, and today a hero. He walked into his house, a wide, peaceful smile on his face, ready to tell his daughter about his day, knowing he had made a difference.